Hello, Aaron Wills again, bringing you another reaction video that I started on Thursday, the 10th day of October in 2024 at 8:45 p.m. Along with welcoming you to my channel, allow me to thank you for watching. Please comment, like, and subscribe before sharing this video and turning on the post notification bell. That would be much appreciated. Thank you. Now we're going to youtube.com to find something to react to that won't give me copyright restricted. I don't know what it'll be, because I think I've done everything. Writing videos give me copyright restricted. This Brooks trial gets me copyright restricted. And I'll find something. I'll try to anyway. Let's see. There he is. Part 2. Part 2. Alright. Oh, it's on time. It's on break. See the video right now. Bringing it on. What does all that say? How come when I put my arrow on it, or my cursor, it turns into a clock, meaning they're on recess. Or on a break, anyway. What do we have? Fat people. That's a Shaun of Steel reaction video. One time I tried to react to a Shaun of Steel reaction video and I got copyrighted for that. 9 craft questions every writer should be able to answer. Let's see what this is about. 13 hours ago.
Five all-new minis, one unrivaled Motortober, now through November 30th.
Look, writers, these 9 questions aren't easy ones to answer, but I guarantee if you think about them and try to figure out for yourself what you think the right answer is, then you are going to be able to write a better book. 1. Do you prefer language as trance or as entertainment? So when you write with language as a trance, you're sort of trying to get the reader to slip into a dream where they don't even see words on the page.
Entertainment, I'd say, for my part, I think I'd write to entertain readers, not to make them just become, entranced. I try to entertain people when I write. I've not written a lot, but I've written and published 1 book. I'm working on a novella right now. I wrote both of them just for entertainment. I try to sprinkle a little thriller in the first one, a little comedy in the first one. This one has a little thriller and comedy too. It's a romantic comedy, just like my first book that I published was. Here we go.
Age anymore. They're kind of just experiencing your world. Language as entertainment is writing that draws attention to itself. It works kind of like a verbal jack-in-the-box. Every single sentence is doing something artistic. It's kind of performing. And a good way to think about these differences is compare any random sentence of, say, John Grisham to any random sentence of Don DeLillo. I chose 2 sentences at random. We're going to put them up on the screen and look at the differences between these 2 sentences. The John Grisham sentence is much more about plainly communicating information. It's a sentence just designed to get information across. While a Don DeLillo sentence is meant as fireworks and to be clever and to make the reader think about language itself. You need to figure out for yourself whether you were trying to write language that works more like trance or that works more like entertainment. And there's also another option, like you could do something in the middle. There are plenty of authors who split the difference.
This is just question number 1. What are the other 8 questions, I wonder? This one's easy for me. I write for entertainment. I don't even know how to put people in a trance. That's pretty advanced, I would say. Advanced trance. Trance is advanced. Entertainment is novice. I don't know.
difference and try to write a little bit of both. And you should also ask yourself this: what type of writing do you enjoy reading? Now, this doesn't always mean you should write the way that you read. Like, for instance, I tend to enjoy writing that does work as entertainment. But when writing, I prefer writing the type of language that works like a trance. 2. What can writing do that films can't? Here's why it's important to be able to answer this question. You don't just want to write books, which are basically movies on a page. Because if so, then why aren't you just writing screenplays, right? Your goal is to take advantage of things that books can do well. You're using this medium of the printed word, so, take advantage of it. Nicholas Baker has this wonderful collection of essays called The Way the World Works. And specifically in an essay called I Said to Myself, he talks about the 3 things that books are better at than movies. 1, interiority. You can go into the brain of your character so much more in a book than you can in a film. I mean, most films don't go into the brain of the characters at all, and very few.
My mother was a diehard, just infatuated with Stephen King's writing, not him himself. She didn't have a crush on him. She was infatuated with his writing. And at the time of her death, she had read every word written by Stephen King and his nom de plume, Richard Bachman, that she knew existed. And she didn't like very many and there's a ton of movies made after Stephen King's writing, and she didn't like any of them except for Stand By Me, which was my favorite movie for a while. That was written after his novella The Body. That was not transformed. That was translated from Stephen King's novella The Body, and he wrote under the name Richard Bachman as well. And my mother had read every word written by Stephen King and Richard Bachman at the time of her death that she knew of. She had an entire collection of Stephen King's hardback novels, every one that had been written at that point. She had a collection of his novels, all in hardback. I was supposed to get that. Instead, my cunt aunt got them instead. My dyke aunt, I think she's a dyke. I don't know. It's not confirmed, but I've never seen her with a man or a boy. And she has a ton of girlfriends, no guy friends, and no boyfriends ever. I think it's pretty safe to say she's a lesbian. But she's disgusting. It would ruin every guy's dream about seeing girl-on-girl action if they saw my ugly aunt, my disgusting aunt, and her girlfriend, whatever her girlfriend might look like. If she was as disgusting as my aunt, then no guy would want to fantasize about those two. So I was supposed to get that Stephen King collection. When my mother died, they went to my cunt aunt, as I just said. That's why I was wondering why I was talking about my Aunt Kara. That's the reason why.
Have voiceover. In general, you want to explore the interior worlds of your character's thoughts because it's something the novel is good at. 2. Time. Novels are definitely better than movies at speeding up through scenes, slowing down at speeds, and constantly changing the tempo. Other than a few montages, in general, movies always move at clock time. So books have this huge advantage because there's a lot more flexibility to skip over the boring parts and then really slow down for the pivotal points. And 3rd, POV variation. You can really get into the voice and thoughts of characters in a much deeper way than film can. Film can follow certain characters, sure, but really the POV is always the lens of the camera viewing this person. You're very rarely in a first person in a movie. It's always omniscient narrator sort of as you view these characters. So the ability to jump from POV to POV to POV in a book is a real skill set that books allow you to have. Now those are just 3 suggestions. I would suggest that you try to answer that question yourself and really ask yourself, why am I writing books? Like, why books rather than a screenplay or a graphic novel or some other genre?
Because I don't know how to write a screenplay. I've considered writing screenplays. I want to write a play, a stage play. Sometimes my books read like stage plays. This character speaks, and that character speaks, and then this character speaks, and that character speaks. It reads like a stage play from time to time, but I know it's bad. I try to stop it. I try to, keep an eye on that and not do it so bad, so often. All right, here we go.
If you can answer that question, you're going to write better books. 3. What should the writer never show? Are there things which you absolutely refuse to write about? I think it's really helpful to think about this question because, you have a lot of options for what to write about, but it's very important to know what are the lines you won't cross. In J.M. Coetzee's book, Elizabeth Costello, he has a narrator who has very firm rules about what she won't write. She says that the writer should never show violence in the Nazi era or violence against animals. But what's funny about this advice is in the very next chapter, this author says something deeply sacrilegious about the Virgin Mary. But I guess for this character, those were their standards. Alice McDermott, in her book, What About the Baby, she also has one thing that she says she refuses to show in her books, and she thinks that far too many authors show it too frequently. It is sexual crimes against young girls. And I hear her, right? I mean, that's not pleasant stuff to read about.
No,
I can certainly understand an author who says, I'm going to draw the line there. That's not something I want to appear inside my fiction. So you need to have a serious conversation with yourself as where do you draw the line? Do you have a line? Should there be lines? I think the Italian writer Elena Ferrante doesn't want to draw these type of lines. She has her character Elena, who is a writer character, say in her book that writers have the responsibility to recount everything in the human experience. And even, she says, what seems unsayable. Ultimately, you need to figure out where to draw the line and what you refuse to include in your writing. The fourth question that every writer should be able to answer is, should you always try to write round characters? So if you've never heard the term round character before, this is something
And I haven't. What is a round character? I guess obviously you can tell us right now.
that E.M. Forrester talked about in his book Aspects of the Novel is he delineated between round characters and flat characters. Round characters are complex, surprising, memorable, they're realistic, they have layers, and they can change. Ooh, and they have backstories too. Flat characters, on the other hand, are kind of surface level, they're kind of one-dimensional, they're very consistent, and overall they're pretty simple characters. Now, once upon a time, I would have instinctually said, well, of course you should always write round characters, right? I mean, aren't those better characters? But over the years, I've come to see that there are certain characters in books that don't need to be super round characters. Like, it's kind of fine that they're one-dimensional because they serve a purpose inside the book. For instance, think about minor characters, like, say, Rex in Toy Story. Rex's main goal in Toy Story is to be humorous, right? It's to make the audience laugh. He doesn't need a super complex backstory to be a super complex character. He really only has one main role. Or think of Prim in The Hunger Games. I do not find her to be a particularly complex character, right? She likes animals, and she doesn't seem to have very many flaws. But she fulfills a very distinct role in the storyline. You can't tell that story without her.
I've never seen the movie, and I've never read The Hunger Games. I should. Everyone talks about them.
At the same time, she doesn't need to be super complex. Like, it's okay to have her sort of be a one-dimensional character. And also, I want you to think about certain genres that don't have any round characters. Stuff like fairy tales, right? No one's saying Little Red Riding Hood is this complex, super deep, round character. No, she's totally one-dimensional. Or think about fables, like Aesop's Fables. Those are stories where you're not supposed to have complex characters. And even think about a whole genre after Franz Kafka, right? Kafka-esque novel. Those people don't even have names most of the time, right? They're K or the hotel clerk or something. So they're supposed to be symbols more than actual people. So of course they're not going to be round. All that to say is, in general, yes, of course you want your protagonists to be round characters, right? It is much more believable. But there are some characters in your book where you shouldn't fret too much if they're not super round and they're kind of flat. 5. Is the novel essentially moral or amoral? So John Gardner wrote a very controversial book called On Moral Fiction, where he basically says the novel has a responsibility to convey moral principles. It doesn't need to be didactic, it doesn't need to be making a point, but it should say something.
Didactic. What does that mean? Hey, Google. Okay, Google. What does didactic mean?
Here's the definition of didactic: intended to teach, particularly in having moral instruction as an ulterior motive.
Yep, that's exactly what he's talking about. He chose the perfect word.
about what it means to flourish as a human, like what is the good life. He says that a lot of contemporary novels, why they fail is because they don't have any sort of moral compass. And he points out that, through most of human history, from Plato onwards, people have assumed that stories should have a moral component. On the other side of the spectrum, you have an author like Milan Kundera, who wrote Unbearable Lightness of Being, among many other books. He said that morality doesn't have any place in the novel. He thinks the goal of the novelist is just to depict life, right? It's not to condemn some people, it's not to reward other people, but just a sheer depiction of what life is like. Now, personally, this is actually a question I struggle a lot with when I'm trying to think about how I'm going to shape my books. In general, I tend to side with John Gardner. Like, I want to uphold certain virtuous characters and make the reader feel as though they really are virtuous. And I like making the reader feel that antagonists or villains are truly evil. On the other hand, and this is where I sympathize with Kundera, is I really dislike finger-wagging didactic novels where they're just like, this is what you should think, and how dare you not think this way. I feel lectured at. So there's got to be a nice in-between space where you have...
I learned a new word tonight. Didactic. It means teaching. Meant to teach about morality in a moral way. So it's kind of like holier than thou art, that type of thing.
Have good and moral points where you don't lecture the reader. That's my 2 cents. You should answer that question for yourself, though. Number 6, should you
include what?
And play.
Include coincidences in your fiction? Some of you are like, I don't try to, but then they kind of happen. Okay, that's fine. What I'm asking then is, should you revise those out or should you keep them in? Now, the reasons why you should use coincidences. Well, they do happen in real life, right? And if novels are supposed to be a reflection of real life, then it would kind of make sense to keep them in. But the question is, are they satisfying in a story?
What movie was that? Poor Keanu Reeves was missing his gal, taking off on the bus. That was happening? I don't know. He looked sad, though. He was going to return her book, it looked like. I don't know.
Story? Or will the reader just think, oh, this is lazy writing, like they're not doing the hard work of making the story actually connect in a puzzle-like way? I do say it's very important where the coincidence occurs. If you have a coincidence at the beginning of your story, 99% of the time that's gonna work. On the other hand, if you have a coincidence at the end of your story, most readers are gonna feel cheated, like you took the easy way out. And the difference between a coincidence at the beginning and at the end is a coincidence at the beginning is not solving any problems, right? It's just sort of opening up the main problem of a novel, perhaps. While a coincidence at the end of the book is usually solving one of the main problems, which feels like cheating. I will say that genre matters, right? The more commercial you're...
It's the same as when I've heard Jim Morrissey talk about this, when in a fantasy book, there's the author pulls out some magical power that they never explained to the reader that existed before, and now your MC runs into a problem, and he or she just pulls out this magical thing out of her ass, out of his or her ass, and bam, and they're out of the problem. And that's cheating. Jenna Morrissey has talked about that a few times in fantasy. That's one of her least favorite things about fantasy, is when that happens. And that's what he's talking about with coincidences.
Your book is, the more that readers will be accepting of coincidences. Ultimately, my perspective is you want character decisions to be fueling your story, the people in charge. It makes them responsible for their storyline. While coincidences is more about blind chance. It takes the burden of responsibility off your characters, and you want to keep that burden on them. 7. What is a better narrative technique? Anticipation or surprise? Surprise would be like in Julian Barnes' Sense of an Ending, there are several surprises about who main characters are, and you're left shocked. While anticipation would be something like Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
That was from The Sixth Sense with the little shot of Bruce Willis there. I'm sure it was. And there was a huge twist in that movie. I won't ruin it in case you've not seen the movie. You should watch the movie. And the problem is, I figured it out before the movie was over and then ruined the movie for me because I figured out the twist.
Marquez, Chronicles of a Death Foretold. I mean, it's there in the title. He's literally telling you in the title, someone's gonna die. And in the very first chapter of the book, he says, like, look, this is who's going to die. And so you keep on reading because you want to see how this person's going to die. So most of my job as an editor is saying, look, you used surprise in this chapter, and I actually think you should use anticipation instead. Like, tell them what you're gonna surprise them with. Tell them in the very first sentence of the chapter, and then their appetite is whetted for it, and they keep on reading, anticipating that event. I mean, I don't think there's an easy answer whether anticipation or surprise is better, but I do think you need to evaluate in your own writing what do you use more often. Like, instinctually, what do you write towards? And then figure out, okay, can I use more of the other one? How can I incorporate both of these techniques?
I can say I tend to write anticipation more than surprise. I just, based on his little suggestions there, I thought about my own writing. And I do, in fact, use anticipation a lot.
Techniques in my fiction, and you need to know when to use one and when to use the other based on the storyline. And by the way, if you want to learn more about this topic, check out BookFox Academy. It's my 11 courses where I talk about stuff like this and get much deeper into how you can use things like surprise and anticipation in your novels. Check them out in the link below. You can get access to all of them for a monthly subscription or an annual subscription. The 8th question every writer should be able to answer is, should you use brand names in your fiction? This seems like such a small thing, but I actually think it makes a huge difference in how readers perceive the world of your novel. So what's the danger of using name brands? Well, like pop culture references and like technology,
You might get sued. No, I don't know.
someone reading it perhaps even 10 years later, it will
I was gonna say that it was gonna date. I was gonna say that. I should have said it. It would date your book. That's probably what would date your book. That's why you shouldn't use prices. A gallon of gas and all those things. It'll date your book.
date your book. It'll make it seem very old. Imagine the book in the 90s that talks about pagers constantly or something. It doesn't make your book feel timeless. It makes it tied to a very certain time period. On the other hand, what are the benefits of using brand names? Well, it's very realistic, right? People often think in brand names, they carry around brand names, and it's also very authentic because it communicates a lot to the reader about who this person is, perhaps. So brand names can accomplish really good character development. And they can also serve as time period markers. So instead of having your book be timeless, maybe you want it to be absolutely tied to the 80s or the 90s or something. So someone who used brand names a ton is Bret Easton Ellis. In American Psycho, he uses brand names quite often to show off a culture of materialism and consumerism. I'm wearing a suit by Valentino Couture, a shirt by Ike Behar, a tie by Bill Blass, and shoes from Brooks Brothers. My outfit is complemented by Oliver Peoples glasses and a Tour Beyond watch from Patek Philippe. On the other hand, look at an author like Cormac McCarthy, who basically uses 0 brand names in his fiction because he wants this sort of otherworldly, deep Western experience for the reader. But really, this is something you should decide for yourself, and just don't decide it automatically, right? I'm forcing you to think about whether you should or shouldn't. On the other hand, it might be nice for
I've never read McCormack, but maybe I should.
another novel of yours to see how many brand names you can squeeze in, and then see what the difference is and see which one you prefer better. Number 9, the very last question is, should you create themes in your work? All right, this one I'm just gonna come out and sort of give my perspective right away. I'm going to say no. And hear me out on this. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have themes. I'm saying that you shouldn't try to create themes. There's a difference. I think when authors try to create themes in their work from the get-go, it comes across as kind of forced, right? The ideal way to have themes in your book is for them to sort of rise or bubble up organically. And here's how that looks. Say you're 3/4 of the way through the book and you realize, I keep on noticing environmental themes in my book, or I keep on noticing acts of kindness in my book, right? You realize that there are certain things in your book that keep on cropping up, and you say, okay, I guess that's a theme. So when you have an organic theme, you tend to avoid the main mistakes with themes, which is 1, over-explaining it, like just to make sure the reader gets it, like here's what I'm saying in this theme. You tend to avoid that because it rose organically through the writing process. It just feels more natural in the book. And you also tend to avoid heavy-handed morality. If you know the answer before you start writing, you're going to try to sort of bludgeon the reader over the head with it. Readers don't like to be bludgeoned, so just treat it in a very natural way, and the reader's gonna get it. Don't worry, the reader will see it. Leave a comment below if you're writing a book that you feel like has themes and how you discovered what those themes were.
So now you can see why this plugin has a place like Hack My VSTs. Output Arcade has samples, instruments, and effects all in one plugin. Let's find a sample that we'll use for.
Well, I guess that video's over. Let's see, what is this?
Most people do not understand. Like, her father is paying the legal bills and co-signed on the home.
Testimony. Alright, let's see. Let's watch this.
Yeah. So that's just the easiest because this goes after credibility. No.
Well, this says, Brooks trial, defense rested by default. That's because he wouldn't answer the question whether he had any more witnesses to call, or if he was going to call himself or his mother or whatever. He wouldn't answer, so she said, okay, the defense rests. The judge said that.
Which it's before defendant elects not to testify, and we have to toss up that one. Yeah. Mr. Brooks, I'll advise you once again if there are any specific requests for either instructions or categories instructions that you want this court to consider, please write a note to pass to the bailiffs who can let me know.
I'm hiding. Do not just be an asshole. He's mad about something. Look at him going on. He's always flipping out in this trial. Look at him pissed off about something. He's banging the table. He's cussing somebody down at somebody. Something's going on. He's muted, that's why we can't hear him.
Need tax help? Get more from your tax pro and spend less. Switch to a TurboTax.
You guys got a headache down there, I guess.
Passenger crossing.
What's going on here? I'm just gonna end the video now, of course. Peace.